Advent 4. Favorite season. Here we go. Say her name. That is the message for today. Say her name. Now, I know in Advent, that might seem weird. Stick with me, and we'll get into it a little bit. There are a lot of directions people can go and people have gone with the life of Bathsheba. What I think we need to do, though, is look at what just a few morsels tell us about humanity and religion versus God, especially in this season of expectant-filled hope waiting. Expectant, hope-filled waiting is what that was supposed to be. Bathsheba did nothing wrong. She was not unfaithful to Uriah. She did not ask for David's eye. She didn't even bathe in public. She bathed in a place that she very reasonably would have assumed was private. Except that the king was on his roof, apparently looking down into the inner courtyards, which is where the bathing would have occurred. So it's not on her. Bathsheba did not ask to be removed from her home at the demand of the king by the hands of the king's men. She did not consent. That's my argument. You can fight back with me on that one if you want to, but she did not consent to sex with the king. Bathsheba did not desire to conceive a child with King David. Bathsheba certainly did not do anything to deserve the death of her child. P.S. Nobody ever does anything to deserve the death of their child. Got it? Bathsheba was a woman minding her own business, bathing and purifying her body after her period. That's it. Simply enjoying that deeper feeling of cleanliness that comes as such a relief after the monthly flow relents. With no way to anticipate what that one act, that one faithful act, I might add, if you read closely in Leviticus and other places, it's referenced elsewhere, what that one act would do to change her life and alter the course of her life. When Bathsheba's story is told, it is simplified, it is danced around. Her name is barely mentioned, and when it is, she is framed as a temptress or a cheating seductress who timed her nakedness intentionally to be seen by the king. That wasn't Bathsheba. That's not who she was. There's nothing to indicate that that's who she was. The writer of 2 Samuel continues erasing her as her brief appearances continue, right? It's like sprinkled. Her name is very rarely used, and most often when she does come into the picture, it's really just as a byproduct of what the reader is being told about David's life and David's situation, or Solomon's, depending on where in the story you are. It's rarely truly just about her. Imagine for just a moment if a woman wrote this story. This is something, by the way, I'm actually thinking about doing at some point in time. How different would her story be? We would see her trauma, her false shame, her fear, her agony, her grief. We would listen in as she navigated a new marriage in a very short time after being widowed to the man who started it all, though she didn't know that he had anything to do with the death of her husband. We would watch as she learned to interact with some semblance of tolerance with David's other wives. Make no mistake, there were many. We would experience the both and of the emotions surrounding the realization that she was again pregnant. The joy and the worry, the anticipation and the anxiety, the grief and the hope. It would all be there. Her story would shine, and his would be in the background. Imagine. Instead, though, Bathsheba's name is removed. She becomes a footnote in David's story and in Solomon's reign, though she's judged for that move. You can keep reading to learn more about that. Here's a common argument. At least she's listed in the genealogy of Jesus. Friends, that is gaslighting. It minimizes what Bathsheba endured. It minimizes what has been done to her story and implies that all is well in the end. Because Solomon rose to power and became a king of notoriety, it implies that all she endured was okay, because in the end, she is part of the line that birthed Jesus. Do me a favor. Go to Matthew 1 and read the genealogy and find Bathsheba. Seriously, pause. Matthew 1, find her. Then come back. If you did that, you notice that you can't find Bathsheba. You find her referenced, but her name is gone. The writer not only does not name Bathsheba, but leaves her as married to Uriah. So, though there might have been no ill intent with that, right? It might have been a way to say that in her heart she was still married to Uriah because Uriah was taken from her, whatever it might be. It also does further minimize what Bathsheba endured through and with David. Say her name, because the erasure of Bathsheba is not okay. And unfortunately, that's not the end. Fast forward to Elizabeth, another woman virtually erased. When you talk about John the Baptist, how many stories are told before you get to the fact of his parentage? And then when you get to his parentage, how much is about Zechariah versus Elizabeth? How much of Elizabeth is told in reference to Jesus and the child in her womb versus Elizabeth? Elizabeth and Mary have a beautiful prophetic exchange, and then the story focuses on Zechariah and remains about him through and after the birth of John. The text simply says this: Now the time came for Elizabeth to give birth, and she bore a son. That's the birth story. Then, when it is time to name the child, which then did not occur immediately, I want you to notice a few details. First, there's an unknown they who plan to name the child Zechariah. This is a detail, I'm going to be honest, I just noticed today when writing this. They planned to name him Zechariah. I don't know who they are, but that's number one. Number two, when Elizabeth goes to stop them from naming her child Zechariah, Elizabeth, in that description, in that sentence, is reduced to his mother. Third, she, his mother, Elizabeth, first speaks the name that Zechariah communicated to her, that God communicated to Zechariah. The name that was revealed, John. Elizabeth speaks John's name. Fourth, Elizabeth speaks John's name and no one listens to her. They dismiss her. Her voice is powerless and ignored. And fifth, to me, most fascinating of all, fifth, only when Zechariah writes John's name is the name John accepted. And I'm actually just now, as I'm saying this, beginning to argue it's not even with the writing of his name. It's more that once he wrote it, Zechariah could again speak. But we won't go down that rabbit trail. The bottom line is this: Zechariah's written word holds more authority than Elizabeth's spoken word. The mother of the child, her voice is ignored. What happened to Elizabeth? What was it like for her to watch her son grow, wondering what the prophecies truly meant? What was it going to look like to see this man grow? In utero, John reacted to Jesus' presence, but what was it like when they met, as they toddled around? Did Elizabeth live to see John as a man of the wild? The writers of these texts made choices about what was included and what wasn't. Preachers make choices every year on what to include and what not to include when these women's stories appear in the lectionary. Will they leave these women as passing background actors in their own lives, or will they shine the spotlight on Bathsheba and Elizabeth and others and give their stories the chance to be shared? An argument has been made that if Scripture is inspired, then clearly God didn't want more of their stories told. Throughout the last 36 weeks, I have come to wonder if perhaps the more appropriate thought is this: though God would not entirely snuff out the humanity of the writers of what is now Scripture, the Spirit would move in such a way as to compel the writers to include as much sprinklings of these women as possible. Siblings, not much has changed, except for this. Women aren't backing down. Women aren't staying silent. Women are no longer falling into the comparison trap that serves only to keep us down, because when we are distracted, tearing one another down, comparing ourselves to each other, we are not together. Now, women are banding together with the men who see and support us and empower us, most importantly, to take over the head of the table and bring in visibility, to teach inherent worth, to ensure everyone knows they are not defined by their past. Jesus came to turn this world on its head, and this is but one small piece of that. She is called, and she is speaking. Soon, just a few days from now, I will be back for Christmas Day. It's possible I'm going to upload it on Christmas Eve. I haven't decided yet, but we'll be talking, unsurprisingly, about Mary, but also about the image of God from a gendered perspective. And so I encourage you, if you don't already have your notifications on, I encourage you to turn on your notifications so that you can be one of the first to know when that Christmas Day reflection is released. For now, say Bathsheba's name. Say Elizabeth's name. Speak the name of all of the women in your life who have been minimized, deflected, distracted, and uplift them and empower them to speak. See you soon.